Well, welcome everyone. I'm glad you could join us. I'm Pastor Clayton Sellers at Faith Collierville Faith Lutheran Church in Collierville, Tennessee, right outside of Memphis. And we're on our journey here of talking to other pastors about their journey through COVID, what life has been like for them as pastors, what life has been like for them personally, what they've been thinking about theologically, and how this has impacted the church over the last year and all those different things that are going on. And today we're talking to Pastor Aaron Boerst, who's a pastor at Wales, in Wales, Wisconsin, at Bethlehem Lutheran Church, and Pastor Aaron has an interesting story of how COVID has impacted him, and we'll let him tell that story. But Aaron, how are you doing today?
So good.
Yeah,
it is a good day.
Oh, good. So here today we are on day 7 of sub-freezing temperatures in Memphis, and we've got at least one more day to go, and we've got 9 inches of snow on the ground. It's pretty wild. What's it like in Wisconsin right now?
That's like an every Sunday here in Wisconsin. We get summer for about 2 weeks in the middle of the year, and then it's just winter the rest of the year.
Winter the rest of the time.
We're hanging tight.
Good.
Warm here is about 20 degrees where we can go out ice fishing again.
Okay, good. Yeah, so I think our high is like 25 today. It's been in the teens the last couple of days.
Yeah, it's bad.
Yeah, it's pretty wild, but I think it's like that everywhere right now.
Especially Texas too, I heard.
My parents are having to deal with some stuff, and my in-laws as well. So Aaron, for just so everybody who watches this knows, you and I went to seminary together. We were on slightly different tracks. I had to do the languages first, and I think you had done those did you go to Concordia Mequon? Is that right?
Yeah, I was lucky. So I was a graduate of Concordia Mequon, Wisconsin, and I was blessed that one of my teachers for Greek happened to write the Greek qualifying exam. So I got a little extra insight on how to pass that baby.
Yeah. Okay.
So I got her on maybe my second try.
Okay.
And then Hebrew, I did a little bit extra work, but got that in before SEM started.
Oh, cool. And now tell everybody just a little bit of history of where you are now at your call at Bethlehem Lutheran. It's a very striking story, especially as we're focusing on COVID and the church and COVID and congregations. So just lay out the time frame of you arriving at Bethlehem Lutheran and the announcement of the lockdowns and how all that's played out.
Sure. So I've had a kind of a tumultuous even ministry, you might even call it. So I'm kind of used to it. So both of us graduated from Concordia Seminary in St. Louis in 2013. Yep. My first call was in a little town of New Berlin, Wisconsin as well. Okay. And served there for a few years. Jumped and served for another 4 or 5 years. My second call, and that was another one a little bit closer to Madison, Wisconsin. Okay. So one was by Milwaukee, one was by Madison. Okay. I'm out now on my third call in about our 8th year of ministry. Yeah. And this is actually right in between Madison and Milwaukee. Okay. So it's kind of fun. So staying all in Wisconsin. Yeah. But yeah, I was installed February 15th of 2020. Okay. And so we had our last service.
Yeah. You're right at a year now at your call. Congratulations.
Thank you. Yeah. A couple of days ago. And life has never literally been the same.
And so February 2020 installed. And then when did the lockdowns hit? When did those shutdowns start to hit your congregation in the Wisconsin?
We had our Ash Wednesday service, and that was the last one. It was probably around March 16th. Or March 16th.
Okay. So you were at your new call for a month, and then everything just got blown up. Wow. So what were those conversations like with, because as a new pastor, you're trying to, learn everybody's personality, and they're trying to learn your personality. What were those conversations like with the leadership?
To be honest, I think a lot of them were starstruck. A lot of them, we had kind of a turnover. We had brand new board of directors, board of elders, all elected. And so they were kind of getting to a handle on what their duties were. Yeah. So I think I had the trust of being the new pastor in town where they kind of let me run with a lot of things.
Okay.
And kind of a trickle down of leadership. And what was a benefit to me is I kind of had the spiritual high and energy of having just be a new pastor,
right.
Be the dominating power through it all. It's like,
sure.
Okay, new call, let's just go.
Right.
And it worked. We just made decisions quick and did what we thought was best and never looked back.
And what did those conversations sound like? Because I know for us here at Faith in Collierville, those conversations were tough conversations. The idea of closing the sanctuary and those weren't easy conversations. What were they like for you and your congregation and your leadership even?
To be honest, I think a lot of it were people didn't really know what to do. And so they were willing to do whatever.
Okay.
And it was hard because we like to compare to our other churches in our area.
Right.
And it was hard for us because we're in a unique setting and we have a unique building. And so I think a lot of that, they pretty much trusted in us saying we have to follow the government.
Okay.
And despite us not being able to be in person, I took it upon myself with the board and all of our leadership. We actually never really missed a service in person necessarily because we did everything outside. We have a large carport.
Okay.
And we played around with ideas. I know some churches did like parking lot services where they had radio tuning in. We decided just to pre-record them and put them online. And at the same time, we would welcome people to come through and drive for a time of prayer, confession, absolution, and Holy Communion.
Okay. Oh, so you communed folks in their vehicles.
Correct.
Okay.
And we were really trying to be careful about it because we didn't want to make it seem like we're McDonald's or anything like that.
Sure.
So it took me a couple hours every Sunday.
Okay.
We posted our video online. As soon as that was done, I was outside ready for people, and we had miles. Not really miles, but a number of cars. It wasn't quite like Field of Dreams at the end of that movie.
Right.
Maybe like 30 cars backed up. And it was fun. That was my way of getting to know people in the first few months.
Right. Now, just real quick, because I know I think other pastors will be interested in this as well, and other just Christians in general. What were some of the considerations you took and the theological and biblical thought process you had for offering communion to folks who are still in their car? You mentioned prayer, you mentioned confession, absolution, and communion, but it does have that. I know it wasn't your intention, and I believe you but it does have that outside view of being like McDonald's or a drive-through. So what were you communicating to the members of your congregation to help say, hey, this is not McDonald's, this is not a fast food thing? What were those conversations you had with your leadership and with the congregation at large to help them see what you were doing?
Sure. I think the overarching kind of meaning behind it was, I want us to be this might be a big kind of taboo word, but as a missional church.
Okay.
This is something I even preached on, where if we're going to say we are going to be a mission towards the community, it means being outside of the church wall and sometimes. So for us inherently to celebrate our Christian fellowship and communion, I decided to move. We had an altar area actually set up in our main vestibule. Okay. Using the same altar ware as our normal church.
Oh, okay.
And while it wasn't the same sort of experience with the whole-blown divine service,
right,
it was a time where it's an individual, say, confession, absolution, period. It's something that we teach even in the catechism. So it kind of reminded me of like individual catechism classes for each people.
Sure.
And then I kind of approached it in that way.
Okay.
So I would invite people to kind of talk about what they're going on in their day in their life. We'd share a little bit of banter back and forth while I was maybe 10 feet away from their car window.
Yeah.
And invite them to pray, to express their concern, and make communion something that was me serving them, God serving them, rather than them driving into church. So it's still the church coming to them. I guess that was kind of the idea behind it. And the perception, I guess, is, the perception is kind of how you take it.
Yeah. And so in kind of in a, you know, in a real way, there's a kind of a putting the church back out in the public sphere, whether anybody else driving by or caught in the traffic paid attention to it. Is that kind of the idea you were going for of hey, this is what we're doing here? Yeah.
And for me, I could have done this where people stayed in their vehicles and did service that way, or I could have walked to their vehicles in a parking lot, but it still made it, I think, as personal as I could be. And it's kind of interesting too. What we have, we're right next to a Division I high school across our parking lot.
Now, real quick,
we normally have campus police.
Real quick, what is it? How big is a Division I high school? Because we do like in Texas and in the South, other parts of the South, we do like an A system. So like a 6A high school is one of the bigger high schools. A 1A high school, you know, they play like 6-man football. So how big is a Division I high school? You know, how many? I'm assuming it's on the larger size, but it's going to distract.
So their current population is just under about 1,000 student body.
Okay, good. All right. So you normally have a Division I high school, and there's usually some other things around. And that's going to impact some things here.
So it made it fun too that we had all the kind of normal school age kids and people kind of doing their thing, the campus police doing their rounds.
Right.
And I don't know if they were watching because they wanted to make sure that we were following the governor's orders. Maybe that was one thing, but it kind of made it fun where it's like you had church outside again and everybody's doing their normal life. It was fun for me.
Yeah. What about it was fun? Because, you know, there are so many that would say that this was a stressful time and it was a hard time. Or when was there a time when it was stressful and it became fun? And what's flipped that switch there?
I think a couple different things for me. Fun because you get to be out in the elements, like wind blowing, rain coming down. People excited because they could leave their home and still be in church when they're not in church.
Right.
But also fun because I was still using like the traditional liturgy of the church, but in a different place. It's like, it was like we weren't even on church property at that point, or even though we were right there in the front entrance.
Yeah.
So it just kind of a new look.
Okay. And so, so as you were doing that, were there any other theological things that you started thinking about? You know, in those first days, you know, in March, April, May, June, were there any theological reflections you had, or Bible verses that jumped out, or things that, you know, that you were thinking about theologically during those times?
I would say, well, outside of the normal, like the Holy Communion offering, I thought one that was important to me. That's something we offer normally on every worship service. At our church here. And what we believe about it is just as important, that the fact that we could still keep doing a celebration of communion throughout pandemic closure.
I see.
So I think the ability of being able to say we never really closed, you could say that. And I think that's important for us to know, that the church never really closes. You're always doing church wherever you are.
Sure.
But I really wanted to be careful not to put my people at harm, or even myself as their leader, by doing something that wasn't necessarily accepted from our doctrinal beliefs.
Okay.
Meaning that I wasn't going to consecrate communion and have them commune themselves from home. Or do something sort of like new agey like that.
Okay.
So I was really kind of keeping that in the back of my mind.
Right.
Especially as a new pastor, I didn't need that kind of perception
right.
labeled right away on me.
Right.
Just doing what I was doing, kind of cringing while doing it.
Okay.
I was nervous, but so I think taking care to bring honor to the things of God.
Yeah.
While being forced to do it differently, it was kind of a concern.
Okay.
And still teach people along the way. Yeah.
Right. Right. As you're growing into this new pastorate and this new service to God and the people of Bethlehem Lutheran there in Wales, Wisconsin. Now, what about how did, if at all, did the pandemic and the response and the situation of the people, how did it shape your preaching? Did it shape your preaching at all? So for example, for me, I felt that it was easier to preach the law and the gospel because I knew a situation that everybody was going through, right? There was a very clear, everybody was suffering under the law of sin. And so everybody's attention was focused in one direction. And so it allowed me to be a little bit more pointed and hit more people with the law and the gospel. I don't know if that's how it went for you, but how did the pandemic and the situation of the past year shape your preaching? And maybe how has that changed at all as things have progressed?
I definitely agree. So like my preaching has definitely changed. It was unique in, I think, the lockdown period because I was between me and our secretary, we're the only ones in the room.
Oh.
Her filming and me in front of the camera.
Okay.
I definitely felt like I kind of resorted back to kind of like seminary theological training where it was more academic, much more obvious about the effects of the law and how it's a broken world. And it actually was kind of fun because we followed the lectionary readings and every week it just seemed like it was hitting whatever was going on in the world.
Right. Right.
And I think I just let that word just preach itself.
Okay.
And I had written kind of a sermon series theme with the lectionary readings with one of our other brother pastors.
Okay.
About how kind of we see the different veils in life that are kind of hindering our vision in the world of what God's doing at work. And I think one of those is the effects of COVID itself. So it made it really easy to preach on.
Okay.
But it has changed a lot.
Yeah.
Again, made it much more academic, much more planned, a little bit more wooden preaching for me.
Okay.
Now, since we've been back in person, we came back actually March 31st, the day of Pentecost.
Oh, okay.
We followed kind of our Roman Catholic diocese on that. And I think it was a perfect time for the church to come back.
Okay.
On a Christian holiday. But my preaching has definitely changed where it's now geared more towards, I think, the social issues of the time where people are, whether it's mental health or whether it's kind of our stewardship of things. I'm able to be more specific, I guess, and where I'm actually seeing where people are hurting. Right.
Now, why I was struck by, you said, when during that lockdown and the streaming only portions of your preaching became, you said, more academic and you fell back on your fundamentals. That's a striking sort of a reflection on your part. And I want to hear more about going back to those fundamentals and why was that a conscious decision or something that you just have noticed in reflection, and why do you think that was your move?
I wish it was something that I came up with, but I think it was a sort of knee-jerk reaction. When you're put against the wall, you go back to what your kind of bread and butter is.
Okay.
And I think I learned, like a lot of us, to write manuscripts and preaching and even to preach them in that way.
Yeah.
I've kind of did a little bit of that, but I mixed in a lot of extemporaneous preaching still.
Okay.
but it was, I think, a little bit more wooden because I was preaching to a camera.
Okay.
For me, I'm naturally an extrovert.
Okay.
And when I don't have people in the room preaching to, it makes me preach, I think, a little more wooden, I would say.
Okay. You don't have that. You don't have that energy to pull from and to see people's reactions and how they're receiving and responding to what you're saying. I get that.
So in a more kind of meta narrative of COVID times, I think by people being in worship, it makes pastors better pastors.
Okay.
Better preacher.
Say more about that. That's an interesting reflection. That's an interesting observation. What do you mean by that?
It's kind of like when you're a pastor in a church by yourself preaching to a camera. It's like you're Father Mackenzie from Eleanor Rigby song.
Okay.
And it feels like you're alone as a pastor. And maybe you're not saying anything that means anything to anybody. You don't really know that until maybe you get to follow up.
Okay.
So you almost have to preach on what you think people need to hear and what maybe might help yourself.
Sure.
So it completely changes the game.
Right. Yeah. So that's a thing. That's an observation that, and an experience that I bet a lot of pastors, across so many different denominations have, is about preaching and delivering the word of God to an empty room, but knowing that you're not just preaching it to nobody, but it's just happens to be an empty room, and the people you're delivering to are dispersed across your community and even nationally. What else have you done as a pastor in your preaching and in your teaching, kind of in response to this pandemic and how this has all played out?
Are we saying more like inherently during lockdown, or like maybe the after effects, or both?
I think in the past year, I know that things were probably heightened and more acutely aware of things during the months of lockdown.
Yeah.
When we had to be streaming only, but even that time, or in the we'll call it the aftermath. How has this continued to shape your preaching and your teaching?
Well, I think in an initial way, I think just for me, on my own personal devotion life, I think when the church was less busy with all the different groups and things, people meeting during lockdown, it actually afforded me more time for myself in devotional life, I guess, for myself to kind of be recouped.
Yeah.
During that time, I was scurrying around a brand new church, looking in all the different rooms and finding out all about the history and kind of just getting excited.
Right.
And I think going back to why I became a pastor, and I think now in my preaching and teaching ability, I think it's a learned behavior again, where I have to remember to carve out time. And I think part of that is me teaching that to my members, how pastors need to be cared for, either from themselves or from another. That's one of I think the silent things during COVID is we say like our nurses and doctors are heroes, because they are. Right.
They're doing good work. They're hard work. Yeah.
The clergy members are kind of like the local purveyors of hope, and they sometimes get forgotten. And who is really giving the pastors spiritual rejuvenation?
Right. I mean, that's one of the ongoing struggles of pastors and burnout anyway, is how are they taking the time to make their own devotional life, or what are they doing to get the spiritual nourishment that they need? I know that's a kind of an ongoing battle. It's probably heightened like so many other things.
So right now, that's kind of like where I'm at in terms of being transparent with my people, with my elders, especially. Like, I'm a human being. I'm lucky to have a lot of the energy right out of the gate, but it's not going to be sustainable.
Right.
I'm needing a lot of extra people to help make sure I'm okay, especially when I'm planning a wedding.
Oh, right. We haven't
engaged over a pandemic.
We haven't even talked about that. So you're at a new call, and you're there for a month, and then the pandemic strikes and the lockdowns, and so you're scrambling, trying to figure out what to do for worship services and for communion, and learn the building and learn the community, all this. And then you just talked about it, but we haven't talked about it. You got engaged during all of this. So that puts a whole twist on the kind of the personal experience of this. Pastors are people as well. And so talk a little, congratulations on your engagement, by the way.
Thank you. This was something planned over time, so it wasn't just as a result of being locked in.
Sure.
But no, my fiance Megan and I been together for a few years, but we were already planning on getting married back in January. We were starting to look at rings before pandemic even started.
Okay.
But yeah, it has definitely created a little bit of hardship where I think having the time to be able to be together and plan is hard. One, because you can't have date nights. You can't go out to restaurants anymore.
Right.
So we learned a lot of home cooking.
Oh, good.
And a lot of outside exercise, because what else are you going to do?
Right.
And it actually works really well because my fiance is an exercise science master. So she's a physical fitness instructor. So it works for me. But no, it still is, I think, a challenge because now, especially when all the meetings come back, I might have a whole day where I start the day at 8 in the morning and I still have meetings going till 9 at night.
Right.
So it's me learning, maybe even failing to learn how to kind of prioritize. And that's something every pastor struggles with. Right. Despite it being a weird year.
Sure. Now that leads into a point that you made just a little while ago about all of those church activities, those things in the life of the congregation that went away. So we didn't have an Easter service, so that meant we didn't have an Easter breakfast. We didn't have midweek Lenten meals leading up to it. We didn't have midweek Lenten meals so far this year. I realized
still aren't. Yeah.
Starting. We didn't have Advent meals. We didn't have a children's Christmas program. We didn't do Vacation Bible School this past Sunday. The men's breakfast hasn't met for a long time. And we're slowly getting back into some of those things, but talk about those things in the life of the congregation and how y'all are bringing some back, or if you're doing any evaluation about what to bring back or when or why or how. And
and then that's kind of been an internal struggle too, between both of our leadership boards. On one, we have differing opinions, both politically and socially, that are kind of a dynamic.
Okay.
But also we have a lot of people that really love to go back to doing and enjoying the things that you need to do for life in the church.
Okay, like what?
Especially we did a lot of those sort of social engagement things, a lot of local mission activities, and a lot of things with our youth on our preschool that we just normally couldn't do. So we're kind of prioritizing what needs to happen first.
Okay.
We've dabbled a little bit with having sort of our fellowship time after worship. We did be able to bring back our Sunday school right away back in September. Mostly because our size, we only had maybe about 25 kids in our Sunday school, and about 25 in our preschool. But we kind of prioritized education in the capacity that we could. We're lucky that we have a really great space.
Okay.
Our church itself was a new build back in 2004, and we could fit about 500 people in there. And we have a whole entire basement of individual rooms. So we naturally had kind of our cohorts for each class.
Okay.
So it made it easier for us in terms of putting safety protocols in, but in terms of the life of the church, we're still struggling with that. And right now we're putting all of our energy into just a Sunday or Wednesday worship.
Okay. Do you have in-person worship right now?
Yeah, we do both. We're probably going to be indefinitely doing virtual, probably indefinitely.
Okay.
But we do one service on Sundays and one normally on Wednesdays. However, I split up Wednesdays to do one early service for folks. They might be more elderly population.
So for your Lenten services, your midweek Lenten services, you do 2 on Wednesday? Correct. Okay. And
yeah, our attendance is still, I would say it's probably about 80% of what it could be.
Okay.
A lot of people are still on the fence, whether they're maybe out of fear or maybe out of convenience or maybe out of just, I think, burnout or maybe out of apathy, I guess.
Mm-hmm. And how are you getting your streaming services out, your online services? How are y'all doing that?
So we were really, I think, behind, I think, the days of technology, like a lot of our churches have been, and we got pushed into that.
Yeah.
We never had a virtual component prior, and our website was extremely outdated. So all of these things are being updated.
Yeah.
But what we initially did, it was me and my secretary on a home video camera on a tripod.
Oh, wow.
At the beginning. And we took about a couple hours just to upload it to our camera and then have it be able to be visible on Sunday.
Okay.
Then we learned by, I think, talking with you and some of our other brother pastors that we were getting more live stream capability. Currently, we still use a Mevo Plus camera on the very front of our sanctuary. And we upload that live to our Facebook page. For people that want to participate live, they can interact with and talk.
Right.
What we do then after that is we pull that video, the live stream video, and we post it to our church webpage as well. For people that don't use social media.
Right.
And then for other folks that don't have any sort of online presence, we've mailed them materials. We've mailed them bulletins, announcements, and things like that. Or even recordings.
Yeah.
And we still do that.
Oh, okay. Very good. Now that leads to, now real quick, do you have any fears about using Facebook and I know there's some grumblings or rumblings and fears about Facebook and big tech and that sort of, I guess it's a popular topic right now. Do you and your leadership, are you looking to get off of Facebook, or are you going to keep using it as long as you can? Because this video that you and I are doing is going to be posted on YouTube. So
sure.
So I'm just curious as to how your church is wrestling with kind of what's showing itself to be the more potential.
Yeah, I've been more and more contemplating having a live stream capability directly to our web page. So we bypass all the social medias.
Right.
However, I would prefer, I think, us to maybe, our next step would maybe to move directly to, say, YouTube. But it still kind of causes us the same issues. Even, for example, last night we celebrated Ash Wednesday. I guess you can say celebrate.
Yeah, I think so.
Mourned, maybe not.
Right.
Ash Wednesday we had it, and I played a video clip from a Johnny Cash song, "The Man in Black," because we had ashes.
Oh, right.
And my live stream video wouldn't post to Facebook because I'm still having to dispute fair use for educational purposes. So nobody can actually watch it on Facebook right now, nor could they on YouTube. So I think that dynamic is hard in our normal in our social media days, but I think ultimately the best case scenario would be to post it directly to your individual parish website, if you can have a format that does that.
Sure. Now you mentioned, getting the services out, and we're going to switch a little bit from technology. You mentioned getting services out, to those who don't have any internet capabilities, and that makes me think you're talking about shut-ins and nursing homes and those sorts of things. How have you handled shut-ins and people in situations like that during this time? And real quick,
ironically,
you spent some time as a chaplain, a hospice chaplain, so you're very familiar with nursing homes and those facilities, right?
Yeah. So another kind of fun fact too, while I was in between maybe my first and second or third call here now, I served in different capacities. For a couple of years, I was a hospice chaplain in Wisconsin. And I think that gave me, a lot of the confidence and maybe knowing the area, the lingo, I guess, how to coordinate yourself in hospital settings. That I think gained a lot of street cred, I guess.
Sure.
So actually, people that were in hospitals and people that were shut in were actually the first people I got to meet in person.
Oh, okay.
In the congregation. And actually, I think because of the ability of having, I think, the safe health care concerns, I think I had my first shut-ins. They were willing, they requested me to come and visit them, which helped.
Wow.
Even if they were like 94, 95 years old people, some of these. And they were totally fine with it. Social distancing, masks. It was one way of getting to them. And I'm still about half and half. There's still a lot of shut-ins. Maybe I only give phone calls or cards or letters to.
Okay.
And half, maybe I visit maybe once or twice a month.
Right.
Same thing for hospitals. I've had hospitals here that one week they would let me in if I was in my full clerical garb. And if I made my point, especially if they were maybe dying or were really in need of care, they would be totally cool. They were kind of respected clergy in that way.
Sure.
But the next week they would totally lock me down. I wasn't their one person on their list. And I was like, nope, I got to turn around. So I think that's been a struggle. But I think is the onus is on the pastor. And one, knowing your local hospitals and your comfortability of your members. I didn't really have that benefit. I kind of just went and did it, whatever I thought I could. But I think the opportunity for us as pastors and all pastors is that you get what you put in. If you really want to be able to visit people, just do it. And ask people. I think because there's it's really easy to just sit back and make the excuse like it's COVID, I can't. And I think sometimes we like to go that route. Makes it easier for us, but if you force your way in, you can get into people when they need you.
Okay.
Some of the places, like my assisted living places, still won't let me, and I'm okay with that. But there's some that will.
Now we've touched on a fair number of different topics now. You know, how you handled communion, and you just talked about shut-ins and streaming, and you know, getting back into the sanctuary and getting back into the normal things in the life of the congregation. Is there anything through this that you've been thinking about, and you're like, man, this is just something I've really been thinking about, and I want other people to be thinking about this as well. Whether it's about the life of the church, or life as a pastor, or life as a Christian in the church and in these days, is there anything that's just been on your mind and you're like, man, this is something that I'd really like to share?
I think the one thing that I always have that I go back to is there's like kind of a trite saying when you don't realize you miss something until it's gone. And I think a lot of us got that way. We take church for granted, that it's just an option. It's one of the things that we can take as a consumer. We get our little daily dose of God. And I think for a lot of that's maybe why they still might be comfortable at home, maybe eating up as many videos as they can.
Okay.
But I think when you take something away, when you say to a church, you can't do it the way you've always done it, you can't maybe be in person, it makes you realize that this is a privilege and an honor that we in America can practice our faith.
So
and
open,
now
right?
Yeah, despite if you argue with your governor, you still can worship. And I think a lot of people now see that where this is maybe one of the few social hubs we still have. It might not be the same back in the day, but this is one of the few positive things you get to have in life. And I think we need churches and we need pastors on their game. So I'd say overall appreciation of church. Our former seminary president, Dr. Dale Meyer, always said this, and I kind of want to take it as my own.
Okay.
Like, it's a good time to be the church.
Oh, sure. Yeah. Well, and why would you draw to that phrase right now? Because a lot of people would say it's so hard to be the church, and you got to do so much work to do this. You have to put in so much more effort to do the same work, and it's so difficult, and blah 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 blah. Why would you gravitate towards that phrase again right now?
Yeah, I agree with you. I'm working harder than I did ever right now, and it's crazy. As along other people are too, but
sure,
I think it's a good time to be the church when everybody thinks it's not, or maybe the world thinks it's not.
Okay.
Because that's what the church is called to be, is the light in the darkness.
Okay.
If you want to use those dichotomies again.
Yeah, it's a very scriptural.
It's always a good time. It's always a good time to be the churches, because we know the end of the story. We know where hope is.
Yeah.
Like, you can see people dying. You can see people scared of death. You can see people crying out and going into drug abuse or suicidal tendencies.
Yeah.
It's a good time for the church, not necessarily buildings, but everybody, people,
right.
Because we get to be the ones to say that there is a reason and hope despite all this going on. We're the local purveyors of hope.
Sure. Right. And so it's a good time to share that word of God with all of those people who are hurting in so many different ways right now.
Yeah.
Just a little bit more, and I think we'll probably wrap it up. Is there anything? I've got two final things, so take them in whatever order. I know that a lot of the pastors. A fair number of pastors that I talked to were reading Martin Luther and how to deal with the plague, because it seemed as if, one, we're Lutherans, and so we generally will turn back to Martin Luther, and appropriately so, but it seemed as if we hadn't had this level of turmoil and strife and impact and on a society level that theologians had written about. So we had to turn back to 500 years to get something that would give us a handle on this. So what would you say, if this video survives 500 years, and who knows if it really will, what would you say to those pastors coming up through a pandemic, sort of situation like we've found ourselves in for the last year?
I would say we tried. And I think that's what Luther was getting at too.
Okay.
He said he would sanitize, he would open up the air, he would ventilate, and he would still go into the plague-infested homes and do his work. At the risk of maybe, that's probably the reason why one of his youngest daughters died, by the way, because he wasn't careful, maybe we would deem.
Okay.
But I think people need to know that we're always willing to try.
Okay.
None of us actually made great decisions. I think we all have fatigue decisions because we never know if they were good to begin with, and we maybe had to change them, but we tried.
Right.
And I think that's what anybody can do in ministry. You just have to try.
Okay.
Any decision as a leader that you don't make is the only way of being a bad leader. As long as you make any decision, you're leading.
Yeah. So I've been saying it like there's not necessarily a right answer or a wrong answer, but there's a wrong way to go about it. Is that kind of what you're getting at?
The wrong way is not trying.
Okay. Or just running roughshod over people, or
kind
of heartless about things. Yeah.
You try with people's best interests in mind, and if you make a wrong decision, guess what? Jesus gives you the freedom to make a new one.
Right. And now, last thing here. I want to go out on this one. What is something that's come from the pandemic and this past year that's really kind of focused us? What's something that you're going to take with you into the rest of your time at Bethlehem and to the rest of your ministry?
That's a hard one. For me, what's unique is being able to start at a church when they were having the same hurt struggle at the same time as me.
Oh, uh-huh.
And it happened to coincide when they were just starting to get to know me.
Mm.
So I think I always get to be known as the pastor that led us through COVID.
Right.
And maybe that's a good thing or a bad thing, but I think I take that with me, and I take the pride of myself for myself, knowing that I kept our church going in the way that we could.
Okay.
And I'm okay with that.
Yeah. Yeah.
I tried to be faithful to God and his people, and hopefully I get to be called his faithful servant.
Sure. Well, Aaron, thanks. Aaron, thanks for taking the time out to have this conversation. I really appreciate it. And I've really enjoyed your insights and hearing how you have dealt with so much through this pandemic. You know, a new call, a pandemic and a lockdown that shut everything down, an engagement. Again, congratulations on that. And I look forward to hearing about how the rest of your ministry goes there at Bethlehem, and as you continue to work through this season of Lent, leading to another celebration of Easter and with God's people there. And I pray God's richest blessings on you and the people of Bethlehem. And everyone who's watching this video, I hope that you find it edifying, and it helps to shape your own reflections and ways that you can begin thinking about or continue thinking about the pandemic and what it means to be the body of Christ in these times. You know, it is a good time to be the church because we are those local purveyors of hope, as Pastor Aaron Boerst shared with us. That's all for today. So thank you for your attention, and Aaron, thank you for your time, and God's richest blessings.